Good morning, everybody, all over Europe, and welcome to our fifth, meanwhile, InterFAB Expert Talk, this time with the topic volatility in air traffic, a growing challenge for the aviation sector. Welcome from the hotspot, Vienna, where we are facing more than 30 degrees for days and nights now. We are very glad you took your time, and we can welcome you to this InterFAB Expert Talk, which will be a little bit different to the ones before, because this time we have planned an expert panel discussion with three experts from FAB CE who will discuss this issue of volatility in air traffic and in how far it is a growing challenge for us, for the aviation sector. Before we would like to invite you to come in with your comments or questions so that we can get an overview and the whole picture of the situation as it is right now. Of course, facing the COVID situation, of course, facing the Corona crisis and how things developed from, if you want to say so, from what happened in 2019, where aviation in Europe got to its limits, then this year of the crisis in 2020, and now in the recovery phase, and what volatility means to us, to the ANSPs and to the aviation industry as a whole from now on. So my name is Markus Bohanka. I'm the communications head of FAB CE, and I'm glad to host this panel discussion today. And I'm especially very glad to have our three experts from FAB CE today, this morning here, who I'd like to introduce to you in the very beginning, before we then get to discussion, putting some questions to our experts, and then you get the possibility, and you can of course, via the chat, bring in your questions, or you raise your hands. We will be, of course, as well be glad to hear or to see you if you open your mics and your cameras. For the time being, please mute your mics and deactivate your cameras so that we can focus on the discussion first, and then we will open the discussion after the panel and after the experts discussion. So I'm very glad to have here Alex Hanslik from Austro Control this morning. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, everyone. Alex Hanslik. I'm in charge of strategy and international affairs at Austro Control. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Alex, for this first introduction. Then we have with us this morning Matej Eljon from the FAB CE Aviation Services Limited. Good morning, Matej.
And good morning, everyone. Also, hello from Slovenia, also hotspot here. I'm Matej Eljon from FAB CE, and I'm a program manager on FAB CE and also director of FAB CE Limited, which is a joint company of 6 ANSPs from FAB CE.
Good morning, Matej. Thank you. And last but not least, from Hungary, always in a good mood and never disappointed, not even after such a close decision as we saw it yesterday in football. So good morning, Jozsef Bakos from HungaroControl.
Good morning. I feel like the Eurovision Song Contest. So Budapest is calling. Thank you very much for organizing this beautiful panel discussion. My name is Jozsef Bakos. I'm head of ATS operation at HungaroControl, and beside that, I'm also head of operational subcommittee within FAB CE.
Good morning, Jozsef. Thank you very much. Glad to have you on board in this discussion this morning. So what is it all about? As I already said, volatility in air traffic, growing challenge for the aviation sector. What does that mean? So we were facing this year of 2019 where traffic exploded and where the airspace capacity came to its limit. Then we had COVID-19, which started actually in 2020, and where we saw how fast things can change and how difficult it is to have forecasts, to get prepared to new situations, to adjust what you have already been planning for a long time. So it's really difficult to predict how the traffic, the air traffic develops and what is going on regarding to cost constraints, to pending European regulation, as well as overall uncertainty. Then you have political issues, you have weather issues. So volatility is an issue for all of us, but there are various definitions on the other hand of volatility, what it actually means. So on the one hand, there's seasonability, variability. On the other hand, there are traffic variations on a daily, weekly or monthly basis. Matej Eljon from FAB CE Services, can you please now in the beginning try to explain to us what volatility in our context means, what we are talking about, and what it is maybe not, so that we get a clearer picture of volatility in this context.
Yes, volatility can have a different definitions. We spoke a lot already at InterFAB and at FAB level regarding the volatility, what volatility is. One perception, a very usual perception, is that volatility is the difference between various days or weeks or months. So, but for me, this is more seasonality, which means a difference between one season and another. And with proper planning and proper forecast, this is not a huge problem for ANSPs. But volatility can have a different definition as well. And volatility for me is also a difference between a forecasted, which means expected traffic, and the traffic which is really happening day by day. And this is a big problem for ANSPs, for operations, which means that you can have a sector overload on one side, or on the other side, it means that you have even too much capacity, which is affecting cost efficiency. And this is volatility which should have the main focus today, especially in the post-COVID recovery.
So thank you, Matej, for this first introduction of our topic today. So now we know what we are actually talking about, or what we want to focus about in this experts discussion. And before we really get into this issue, let me start with calling all of you and asking you about the current situation and how your organizations or how your perception is of what the Corona crisis did with us, with our organizations, with your organization. Of course, it will be interesting to discuss that with all of our participants later on then. But Alex, maybe you can start and let us know what Corona meant for Austro Control, what the situation is like right now, and how in your organization it can be handled.
Yes, Markus. I think the first thing I would like to say here is that the Corona crisis actually doesn't have anything to do with volatility. It is an unprecedented meltdown of our industry. So that's not really something that you would, that you would include into a concept like volatility. It is something completely unprecedented to our industry. Doesn't even have anything to do with crisis in the Middle East or SARS or anything that we've witnessed in the past, which we would probably associate with volatility of some sort. Corona is different. Corona is a complete stalling of the whole economy, and the whole economy, including the ANSPs and especially the aviation sector, had to adapt to that. Now, what did we do? I think, at least as far as Austro Control is concerned, but I think it's pretty much true for the whole industry, we did actually quite well. As far as Austro Control is concerned, in fact, we didn't even get any direct subsidies from the government. We had some possibilities of sending people on short time and stuff like that, which was promoted by the law, but that was true for every company. So we didn't get any direct subsidies. Operationally, it was a challenge because from one day to another there wasn't any traffic in the airspace, so we obviously had to adapt our shifts. We had to adapt, introduce new systems for the ATCO shifts during the day and stuff like that. And that was a challenge, but I have to say, from a mere operational point of view, crises are easier to handle than an overshooting demand. Once you don't have traffic, you have the cost problem. You have to make sure that that you reduce costs wherever possible. But that's a completely different challenge than facing unpredicted traffic levels from an operational point of view. So I think we came through the crisis quite okay. We were able to reduce costs. We were able to adapt operations. We have now the challenge, obviously, of the operational ramp up again. So we use the time obviously for reskills training and stuff like that, but that's just the obvious that everyone else would have been doing. There's one thing that is sort of helping us, which is that the ramp up is happening to some extent gradually. So you don't have 20% today of traffic and 100% the day after that. So, but there is a gradual increase that we're observing over the weeks, and we're expecting traffic levels of around 75–80% over the summer, and that helps a little bit in ramping up our operations again.
Thank you, Alex. Matej, crisis is something very different from what we call volatility, Alex said, and it's easier to handle, or maybe a little bit easier to handle a crisis, or it's different to handle a crisis than a volatility problem itself. Are you of the same opinion? How do you see the situation that we're facing now, maybe or hopefully at the end of this Corona crisis?
I fully agree with Alex that this COVID crisis has nothing to do with volatility, that's for sure. But volatility will be extremely important in the post-COVID recovery when the ramp up will happen, and it's happening now. Volatility will have a great effect on the ANSP operations in terms of providing just the right capacity. Just the right capacity. It means that on the other side you don't overshoot capacity and produce too much cost. And on second side, you have to provide capacity when it's needed. And here volatility will have a great effect. Also, the short-term forecasts are showing that the traffic variation day by day, even in the next few weeks, will be actually huge. And this is also an important mechanism which volatility is producing. And here I fully agree, volatility will be important. When you asked how FAB CE is dealing with the crisis and the ramp up, FAB CE also changed a lot. We introduced also more flexible cost structure, so we try to save some money to the stakeholders. But the FAB CE as such is not a service provider, so we are focusing on the projects which are delivering something. And we also turned from the capacity focusing projects a little bit more towards the projects which are bringing us some quick wins in terms of the cost efficiency. So this is maybe the reaction of FAB CE as such, as the program itself. But overall, we are trying to support the stakeholders, so all 7 ANSPs from FAB CE, to introduce more flexible cost structure and to get the benefits out of the projects.
Okay, thank you, Matej. So we see we are still all in the dealing with the ramifications of Corona, of COVID-19. Jozsef, what is the situation like in Hungary, and how are you dealing now with the uncertain planning process that we're facing for the post-Corona era, and what is the situation like right now?
Thank you. I absolutely agree with everything what the previous speaker said. In 2020, the main focus in HungaroControl was the cost control, to keep the cost under control. And the second one is what to do with the training, because we had a quite ambitious training plan just to keep up with the training, because in 2019, as you said, the capacity was absolutely below the demand, and the main reason for us was just because of the lack of controllers. So we launched a quite ambitious training program, and we had to ensure that we will be ready to provide better capacity after the COVID crisis. So that's why we decided and discussed a lot what to do with the training. So we decided to continue. And I think this is really good. It was a good decision, because this year we see in the Southeast axis in our region a much higher predicted ramp up of traffic than in other part of the Europe. And hopefully in 2022, when the guy will qualify it as a controller, we will have a better capacity provided. Just concerning the traffic forecast. So from December until now, we saw three different scenarios. In December, we were told by a network manager that the traffic will on the busiest day up to 75%. Then in the middle of March, when the vaccination was very slow, it was modified down to 60%. And now, during the last months, it came up to maybe 80%. And on the last Monday's teleconference, network manager said that even possible to ramp up to 90% in the Southeast axis. So hopefully there is not a problem nowadays, because even the 90% is not from the experience, it's clear that the 90% has a buffer of about 5 to 10%. So we are still having the sufficient capacity, but this is the volatility what we are facing, that even on a half year the forecast is changing 3 times.
But Jozsef, from your operational point of view, how can you cope with this uncertainty of traffic forecasts? So what do you actually do then in HungaroControl to get somehow along the situation?
We are not talking about 2020, because it was different story.
Right now,
the main focus was to ensure the service continuity. So we also changed the rostering of ATCOs to make sure that the disease is not spreading among controllers. We were quite successful on that. But for this summer, we had already modified the rostering 3 times. So the number of required controllers modified 3 times. And we are just finishing the first month of the summer. So we now have even a higher figure of controllers for the daytime, as we were planning in March, April. But it's really difficult because people are planning summer vacation, so it's not easy to cope. But until now, until this expected traffic level, it is possible, but not in the 2019 situation.
Matej, in FAB CE, you are providing us with this traffic forecast. You're collecting all the data. Do you think there will be improvement within a short time in the certainty of these traffic forecasts? You are monitoring the development of these traffic forecasts for quite a time right now, and you see it's difficult for the whole aviation industry, for the NSPs especially, to do their planning exercises.
Yes, we are following very closely the traffic. The traffic today in FAB CE is around 50% of 2019 traffic, plus minus 10, but we are somewhere here. Jozsef already mentioned that they are finishing the first month of the summer traffic, but the future will be very much different according to the short-term forecast. We are preparing also day-by-day forecast for the next 6 weeks. And the forecast is showing actually that July will be much better. It will be much more movements in FAB CE area, starting with the first week of July. So it seems that everybody is hoping that the European Green Passport will actually release the traveling. And it seems also that basically most of the traveling will be based on the leisure services. So basically people are going to holidays. There is no business traffic returning. So the traffic is much different from the traffic we were used to in 2019.
And how reliable would you estimate those forecasts?
Well, so far, before in spring, it was not very reliable. So when the weeks are coming closer, the traffic was then different. But now we see more stability in the traffic forecast. For most of the flows, the only uncertainty is still the UK traffic. We saw some decline between the forecast and the actual traffic because of the prolonged measures. But from the traffic originating in Europe, in continental Europe, it's becoming more and more reliable. It's a big ramp up visible for July. So we see a ramp up from 50% to about 70% of the 2019 traffic. And in August, it's even much better. I don't know how reliable this is, but we can see even some days, especially for Austria and Croatia, where the traffic is above the traffic in 2019. which will be really a huge demand and also a challenge for NSPs. But we can see another pattern as well, which we didn't see before. Before, the traffic was very consistent and according to the Stat4 forecast for the region among all FAB CE states. Now there is a big difference in forecast between southern axis and the northern states. So what we can see is that Slovakia and Czech Republic are doing much worse because of the complete absence of the Asian traffic. And this will be the pattern for this summer.
So a number of challenges we are still facing or that are upcoming. Alex, the reason why we talk about volatility is not only that it's interesting to have this InterFAB exchange on this level with a number of European experts from aviation, but we have those performance plans that we have to fulfill, the NSPs have to fulfill, that have a span of a period of over 5 years. And now we see that with Corona, everything has changed. Actually, everything has changed, and that we're facing a very different situation. And which is fundamentally different from what we were dealing with before. So do you think the system is still viable of those reference periods of 5 years, planning horizon? Is this the future?
Yeah, I think we have to dig into the issue a little more to really answer that question. I think, first of all, what I would like to say also, echoing a little bit what Matej and Jozsef said, is we have to realize that there is a lot of flexibility in our systems to respond to volatility as long as the demand doesn't hit system capacity limits. Beyond the system capacity limits, we're struggling. But below that, there is a lot of flexibility. We do a lot of things, in terms of shift changes, ad hoc overtime, flexible position planning, multi-sector ratings and stuff like that. So what I'm trying to say is it's not, ANSPs are not rigid infrastructure providers who cannot respond to any sort of volatility. We are actually quite flexible. We're struggling once the demand exceeds system capacity levels, for whatever reasons, and we suffer all the more if these system capacity limits are exceeded for a long period of time. So coming back to your question, I think in infrastructure investment cycles and innovation cycles are 5 to 7 years. So it really makes sense to have 5 and 7 year plans. But those have to be rolling and those have to be developed over time. And I think when we talk about volatility, we really have to think about, developing the system and optimizing the system. Developing the system means 5 to 7 year cycles. How can we create capacity in this time range in order to ramp up the system, in order to enable demand to come? Which is why I'm a promoter of the thinking that the focus of Single European Sky and SESAR must be an infrastructure renewal program in order to enhance the system capacity limits as a whole. Because if we do that in an efficient manner, the question of whether or not traffic forecasts are accurate to the last decimal place become less important. In the midterm, I think we have to improve slot management. Every airport has its system limits and there is slot regulation for a good reason. We don't have anything like this for the airspace. And we should be really investing into research and development to improve our slot management. And then in the short term, when weather phenomena arise, when distortions are in the system, we have to handle them. And we have to have a flexible system capable of responding to these distortions. And then obviously what we need is a better trajectory planning and very many other things that you can think of. So what I'm saying is 5-year plans are not wrong, but they're not the whole story. You have to have some flexibility in between. There have to be rolling plans, but you have to also have a clear picture of what the system capacity should be in 5 and 10 years from now, because this will be the framework within which industry dynamics can develop and demand can be developed by the airlines.
So it sounds like a call for more flexibility, for adaptation of the system, and for some lessons we still have to learn from this corona crisis. Thank you, Alex. Matej, Alex has mentioned a number of aspects right now, and yeah, we know NSPs are subject to the performance, and volatility has a major impact on performance. So Matej, how do you think this capacity can be provided, can be created to have the resources at the right time in the right place?
The ANSPs are becoming more elastic, especially in cost structure now, and this is also a direct consequence of the COVID. Not so much of the single European sky, at least it is speed up. But the ANSPs will have to work even more on this elastic cost structure, which means that they will have to be able to adapt to the short-term traffic forecast and to direct capacity where it is needed. For sure, also technological advance, technological improvement will play a role here. Digital transformation is coming finally in ATM business as well. So we will have more advanced systems now. We will have much more data in the system, which will be exchanged across the border. We will do much more cross-border operations in terms of static and dynamic sector changes and sector border optimizations. We will have much more operations as a free route airspace, speeding up also cooperation between ANSPs, and this will all have a significant impact or more flexibility in ANSPs. Also, maybe some changes in rostering, in licensing, also maybe in cross-border support of ANSPs will play a role here. But the point is that this elastic cost structure will have to improve also in ANSP business, and now it's just the right time to start with the new concepts and to support this.
Thank you, Matej. Jozsef, we have already learned in this InterFAB Expert Talk that we have to differentiate between crisis and volatility. Now, we know there are weather impacts, for example, weather patterns. Then we know there are political issues, as, for example, the situation around and in Belarus recently. What kind of impact does or do such events or such issues have on the planning process of the ANSPs right now and on volatility especially?
What Alex said, I also absolutely agree that we had plans and we need plans in the future as well. And this is not a joke. So when the Commission requires ANSPs to make a planning for 5 years ahead, they do all what they can in order to provide the best planning. And the planning is based on the information available at the time when they are planning. And this is typical. It was a typical situation for us in RP2 period when we've submitted our plans with the increase of capacity to the required level. But in 2014, we got the Crimea crisis. Then from one day to another, more than 100 aircraft changed their routing, basically from the Middle East and from the Far East floating into the Europe via the Hungarian and Austrian and the Eastern European ANSPs. And then in July, the Malaysian shutdown took place in the eastern part of Ukraine. An additional 25% was changing their routing and again making diversion via the Hungarian airspace. So from one day to another, within 1 year, we experienced a 35% increase in traffic. So this is something what you cannot foresee. And this is what, make all your planning rubbish, because within 3 years, for example, in our case, we absorbed all our capacity planned for 5 years. So within 3 years, we got to the limit, and it was really difficult in 2018 and 2019 with cope with the traffic. And here now comes the volatility. So when we said, okay, we are capable to control 50 movement per hour within one sector, and suddenly 7 70 appears, and 70 wanted to cross the airspace. Of course, you cannot provide it. And this is really complicated. And again, now we are required to make a planning for 3 years. So what we can do our best planning based on the available information, and the information is very limited. So we are familiar with the Eurocontrol plans, 3 different scenarios. One, if the vaccination is successful in 2021, then we may expect a recovery by 24. But from airlines like Wizz Air, we already heard that even recovery, 2019 recovery, may be expected in 2022. So it's really complicated. But we do what we can, and I hope that the financial resources also will be available for our plans. So it's really complicated, and but I'm agree that we need plans. So this is out of questions.
So what we see is we need plans, as you said, on the one hand, and it is a very complex situation and a very complex planning process, as you say. When it comes to mitigation, how do you think we could fix this issue? Should there be more of centralization? Should the network manager play a more intense role, maybe, or should it be rather on a national level or in other alliances where this volatility issue could be mitigated, could be fixed?
We saw last year the intervention of network manager when we saw at the beginning of COVID crisis that the Eurocontrol invited the idea to give relief to airlines and pay for the service what they received from the service providers. And the latest payment is arriving in July this year or something like that. For me, this is not a good solution, because we provided the service and we get paid only 1 year later. But from everybody from the ANSP is expecting a reduction of cost. So I wouldn't say that this was a good decision, but we can discuss later on and argue on that. But what I see, the role of network manager to better manage these capacity issues, not the financial impact. So I think Eurocontrol is not a financial regulator. But what I can expect to better how to allocate the traffic flow, and we saw some sign in 2018 and 2019 when we had a problem in the middle of Germany in Karlsruhe sector. We saw collaborative decision making where the traffic can be shifted. How much percent of reshifted traffic can expect Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and these kind of things. This is what I see the role of the network manager, and not in the economic part.
Do you think on the FAB level or on the InterFAB level there could be done some improvement regarding volatility or mitigating the problem?
This is again quite we didn't say about the reason of volatility, but if you remember, maybe you cannot remember, but I can still remember when we had a few air corridors over Hungary. That time there was no volatility because each flight from Bucharest to Frankfurt was using the same corridor. Since we have introduced the free route, and since we have the cross-border free routes available, especially in the Central Europe, we see that every day, and even within the day, between the two city pairs, our airlines are flying a different way. So this is the free route. We get freedom in flight planning. And this also one of the reasons that the volatility is happening, and we're facing that. But I see it's not too much within the FAB CE level, because we cannot regulate the traffic. So airlines doesn't like the route restriction that where we allow them to fly. So introducing the free route, we give 90% freedom for them. Feel as you wish, and as you see, it's better because of the airspace reservation in Germany, how you can avoid what is the upper wind and so on. So we give them a freedom. It's very difficult to locally regulate. So it must be seen at network level, and that's why I see the bigger role for network manager in this respect.
So the free route system, of course, brings a lot of benefits, but on the other hand, as well, a number of challenges. And Alex, Jozsef already mentioned the airlines right now. Of course, they have the right to have their expectations, and they want, of course, a good performance of the ANSPs. But as we got it from this InterFAB Expert Talk now on volatility, it is a complex system, and it's not that easy. As it might seem sometimes. Sometimes it seems airlines are quick to criticize the work of ANSPs and the performance and how our work is done. Do you think this criticism is justified, and in how far?
Well, to be honest, I have a lot of sympathy for the criticism that is articulated by the airlines, because there's a lot of money at stake for them. So I don't think we have to be too touchy. I think the airlines know that we obviously are in the same boat. We're all in this together, and so we need to work in partnership in order to do this very difficult task of managing supply and demand. And I think there is a lot of also partnership spirit in there. So that's okay. The problem that we have is that we lack the data for an objective discussion. And this is something we have to improve on, I think. Let me just give you an example. If there is, let's assume at Austro Control, one day we have a staffing problem in the ops room. We have to introduce slot restrictions. This will divert traffic to a different unit, for example, to Jozsef's ACC, in which case they have to start slotting, and they will be punished for delays that they're actually not responsible for, because this is going to exceed their capacity limits of the day. And so whatever statistics we are getting from the system at the moment are not really telling the truth. And if that's the case, it's also difficult in a partnership to have an objective discussion of what the reasons for problems are and what we can do about it. So we really have to improve on that. And I think all this artificial intelligence, big data management and stuff, it should help us doing that better in the future. I think that's a prerequisite. In more general terms, we have to make sure that we know what we can know. And that means a lot of data analysis. And then the second question is, how do we deal with external shocks? And this is where partnership comes into play. And there also comes into play the question of at what level do you solve problems ideally? So there's stuff that needs to be solved at the network level, stuff that needs to be solved on the regional level, and stuff that needs to be solved on a local level. And we have to be very clear about that. And this will help us managing supply and demand better in the future than we did in the past. But answering your question, I don't think that the criticism is always justified, but I have a lot of sympathy for it. And I think the more we have objective data to discuss about, the better.
So data will play a very important role in the future. I think that's something that turns out from our discussion as well. Thank you, Alex. And Matej, this flow of information, of data, this exchange of data before we come to the discussion. And I want to open the floor for questions and for inputs. And thanks to Jenny Taylor, who has already put a question in our chat, and you're invited to do so as well and come up with your questions. But one last question from my side to Matej. So this demand for standardized and fair exchange of information, of data, open book policy somehow, and to really exchange the data within the aviation industry in order to get the best performance everyone wants to expect and wants to provide. Do you see a chance for that in the near future?
Yes, data is extremely important and will be even more important in future. Actually, the access to data and the production of much more data than today, for me, is the main element of the digital transformation, which ATM system will have to go through. Today, at that time, ANSPs are pretty blind of what is going on very much beyond the borders in terms of real tactical data, real-time data, and the improvement and CESAR program as such will provide and will generate and share much more data as today. So this is the key for much better planning, for less volatility if we are talking about daily volatility and technical planning, but also the data about the behavior of traffic and also the data about the plans will enable us to plan much better future capacity, which will be still the key in the future. On the other side, if you have more data, you can adapt your operations also towards the right capacity at the right time, which will bring the cost down on one side and provide the capacity when it is needed at exactly the right amount. This will be all based on data.
But from a practical point of view, do you think it's realistic to have this exchange of data? Do you think the system is mature enough and we are all ready and prepared to open our books and to do this exchange of data?
We are not ready and prepared yet, but we are investing a lot in new functions and new ATM systems, and also at European level, you know that Network Manager is also deploying a new system, and when all those pieces will come together, and also new standards and new projects like a trajectory-based operations, a better data link with the airspace users and so on, well, when all those projects will be completed, then the real revolution will start. But there are no quick wins. I assume we will have a major results in a period of about 5 to 10 years.
So thank you very much, Matej Eljon, Alex Hanslik, and Jozsef Bakos for this very interesting discussion right now. And you are now all invited to come up with your question. I would like to open the floor for a discussion with all of our participants in this InterFAB Expert Talk. And yeah, Jenny Taylor has already sent us a question or an input here via the chat. But you can also raise your hand here in this Teams meeting, and we will be glad to see or to hear you, to hear your questions personally. But Jenny said, and Jozsef has already mentioned, that free route, for example, made volatility and planning processes even more complex and opened up some challenges in the planning process. And now Jenny says that there is an additional issue, which is environment. So has environment or planning with environmental questions made the system even more complex? Has low emission flight paths become more important than on-time arrival? How would our experts estimate this question? Jozsef, maybe you...
I wanted to respond. Yes, I mentioned that the free route, the introduction of free route is a big step forward to help to reduce the emissions. So when we introduce a new free route airspace somewhere in Europe or even a cross-border free route, we always try to compare the data, what was the route lengths in the ATS route environment, and what is the expected benefit by giving the chance to airline to fly the shortest one. And it's always on the focus, and we very much focus on not only what is the time saving, what is the fuel saving, but also what is the saving on CO and NOx emissions. But next year, it's already gone. You cannot compare your free route from previous year to the next year. And with the growth of air traffic, what we see in 2019, so it was really absolutely peak year in aviation and European aviation. The emissions became very, very important and very focused. And yeah, sometimes it's more important than the on-time arrival. But there is very limited what the ANSP can do furthermore. We can try to optimize the requested level to the flow level. This is what we can additionally do, but this is again not only ANSP, this is also the airline. So I think the limitation for ANSP is here. Mm-hmm.
Alex, Matej, something you would like to add to this trade-off between maybe the environmental question and the on-time flying?
Yes, if I may, I think the first thing is obviously the environmental issue is becoming more important in the equation, and there will always be a trade-off between different goals. I don't think that necessarily environmental friendliness and on-time performance are contradictory. Today, there is a lot of buffer in the airline schedule accounting for capacity shortages in air navigation services. Once they know that free route is available, once they know that there is enough capacity available in the system, they can rely more on the most environmental friendly routes, and they don't have to build in too much buffer into their schedule. So I don't think that there is a natural contradiction between the two. It can be, but it doesn't have to be necessary.
Okay. Roland Behran from the FS from FABEC sent us a question via the chat, and he reflects to the different kinds of volatility that we have already discussed today. The seasonal, the regional, local, the weather impacts. From an ops perspective, he asks, which kind of volatility can be handled best? Jozsef, maybe you're the one who can answer that best.
This is a tricky question from Roland, because we see the ACE report, annual ACE report, is dealing also with variation of traffic, and we see that our region, the southeast part of region, southeast axis, in terms of variability, has the highest score. So the traffic between the winter and the summer traffic is very different. In our case, in Hungary, sometimes it reaches 2 times at figure 2. So during peak days of summer, we have 2 times more traffic than in winter time. So this kind of seasonality or variability is known for us. I think it's much easier to deal with that, because you know that this will happen. But what is happening during the day, and what is the impact of the different restriction in the European airspace have on the flight planning of the airlines and on the flight? It's much difficult to deal with the daily variation and the daily volatility. And also for us, it's known that the weekend, starting from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday and Saturday, it's also much higher traffic, despite of the western part of Europe, where these are the most quiet days. So the busiest day Friday, but Saturday in Western Europe is the low traffic. Typically low traffic, but in our region, this is the most busiest day. So we know that, but within the day, it's much difficult to deal with that.
So a difficult question coming from Germany's Roland Behran to Hungarian Jozsef Bakos after this difficult night recently, this football night. Thank you very much, but perfectly answered, of course, by Jozsef. Matthias, also from the AFS, Matthias Wittome, has a question that I would like to forward to Matej, maybe. Start4 only provides at country level an annual figure of forecasted traffic with questionable quality, he says. So to what extent does the forecast help at all for capacity planning, taking into account unforeseeable events, as we say, like Ukraine, like Qatar, Libya, Belarus, and the Wuhan disease, which means COVID?
Yeah, a few years ago, the Start4 forecast, of course, it was not of perfect quality. There were deviations, but at least it was still a good tool to do some capacity planning. Now with everything happening, not only COVID, but also all other crises, it's become more and more questionable if this should be the main tool or the only tool for capacity planning. It is an important tool, but ANSPs are more and more relying also on some other data they are receiving from the airspace users or from their past experience. So this local component in traffic forecast, at least in FAB CE states, is becoming more and more important. For example, I spoke before about the traffic forecast. If you would stick only to the HungaroControl forecast for this summer season and for 2021, you would not expect so high peaks in the summer season as we are forecasting now in our short-term forecast. So it's extremely important, and besides Start4, you should use also other data. It's extremely important to produce a local forecast and also to use the experience from the past. So I would not say that Start4 is so bad that it should not be used, but there is always a room of improvement, and other mechanisms should be in place as well.
Okay, thank you. Matej, Alex, maybe you can reply to the input from Jean-Michel, who says interdependency between the environmental costs and the capacity is also a key issue that has to be solved to limit the impact of volatility. Can you agree with that?
Well, very certainly I can. I think it goes without saying that if you want to have a system that is capable of responding to phenomena like volatility, you cannot, design the system to be ready only for one scenario. Now, if you want to have a system that's more flexible than that, you need to have some buffer in it, and that means that there is obviously some cost that has to be accounted for in order to be able to respond to volatility. And also, when it comes to environment, very certainly you have to invest into systems, into system upgrades of all sorts in order to be able to offer the most environmental friendly routes to the airlines. And that comes at a cost. So there is an interdependency between these key performance areas, and that obviously also has to be balanced in a very clever way. So I totally agree with that.
Okay, thank you. Matthias comes up with another question. Should volatility be a performance indicator within the KPA capacity, as it seems to be linked with delay? What is the opinion of our experts on this issue?
If I may.
Yes, please, Jozsef.
I wouldn't say that the volatility should be a performance indicator, but what I'm sure is that we have to change the measurement of the capacity, because the present one and the used until now one, that the delay caused by the ANSP, for me it's not a fair one, because as I said in my previous time, when we declare that we are able to handle 50 aircraft and 70 would like to cross the airspace, it's above the declared limit. And we are talking about network operation planning process, which is quite robust in Europe, and it's done for decades already. So when we agree that this will be my capacity for the summer, and if extra 20% would like to pass, and then I get penalty for that I was not able to let 70 aircraft through, it's not fair for me. So we have to work, and I emphasize it already in different meetings as well. So we have to work. We have 3 years to develop something new and better capacity measurement for the capacity, because this is not fair for me.
Matej, Alex, what do you think about the question of KPA volatility?
You would usually like to see the KPA if you have at least some partial control on it. I'm not sure how much control ANSP has on volatility, because volatility is mainly driven by outside factors. So to have a performance indicator on that, it's again a very, very tricky issue. But what I would surely agree is that volatility and also interdependency mentioned before should play a much bigger role in target setting process, and this is much more important for us.
Yeah, if I was to add something, I would look at it from a slightly different angle, perhaps. It's always good to have KPIs, and as I said, the more data you have, the more objective, reliable data you have for the discussion, the better. And so if there's a clever way of depicting volatility in clever KPIs and stuff, that's obviously good. But I would suggest something different. What we're lacking in our performance regulation is an incentive for being flexible. Today, the way ANSPs are governed by regulation is a clear incentive to reduce costs in the first place. If I may refer to what Jozsef said, if 70 aircraft want to fly through a sector that's 50, there's hardly any incentive for an ANSP, whether or not they would be able to even respond to that. But even if there were, there's hardly any incentive to respond to that demand. Because every single euro that we save from the regulated cost can be, belongs to us, and there's hardly any additional revenue we can generate. So what I'm trying to say is, in even in the economic regulation of the NSPs, we should think about incentivizing flexibility a little more than we do today.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Roland concerning the flight planning. How can airlines, and maybe more important, the CFSPs, help to improve the situation? Would standards or harmonized algorithms on their side be helpful? Matej, maybe?
Regarding the flight planning, I think it's very important that the airliners are really planning according to the all limits in the airspace, and also that they stick to the plans they submit. That was usually not the case before the crisis, especially during the peak summer season. Usually it was a problem also that some airspace users were not sticking to the plans they submitted, but they tried to get the more optimal way, and this was also producing more volatility in some sectors. So for sure, a very accurate planning according to the published information is very important for ANSPs.
Okay, and then looking also at the time, which is flying, I would like to take up probably as the last question already Jean-Michel's question or input, and I would ask our experts and panelists maybe to wrap up our issue of volatility a little bit with this question, which says, after 2008, the economic crisis, it took 6 to 8 years in some airspaces to recover the same level of traffic. With the COVID crisis, which is much more impacting for the industry, we have how can we now trust in the start for assuming that the traffic could be back at the same level as 2019 within 5 years, or to put it in other words, and to open up the prediction time, what do you think? When will the traffic be back? Will it come back to the level of 2019? Will it return to the pre-COVID times, or will it be different then? Jozsef, maybe you want to start.
Yes, it's a good question, because as somebody would like to know what will be the Eurojackpot numbers for this week, and it's very difficult. And for me, the biggest question, what will happen in September this year? Because last year we saw that July and August, the recovery of traffic in July was starting, ramping up. But in September, we went back again, not as deep as it was in April and May, but into, again, stagnating traffic figures. The big question, how the aviation will continue in autumn. If there will a fourth wave of COVID be there, or the vaccine will save the people from getting sick again? So these are the big questions. And if the answer for that will be positive, so the aviation will continue on the autumn level, what we always experienced, and the vaccination will really help people. Maybe there will be a third vaccine needed, but this is not a problem, because if we can save life with that, that's fine. And then I expect the recovery much faster than it was foreseen. And this is, again, some kind of volatility.
Of course, again, something we have to face then, of course, in a positive way, and something that we would like to have to deal with, this kind of flexibility, if the traffic will come back earlier than we expected. Matej, what do you think?
Well, I fully agree with Jozsef, but I would like to add that the recovery will be also very much dependent on the global economy, and this crisis has a very much different impact on the global economy than the 2008 crisis. So it's much different. Now we can see that some domains are heavily affected, like tourism, business travel, of course, aviation, and some other domains, while different domains are doing actually very good and are not affected at all. So it all depends how the crisis will overflow from the affected domains to the global economy, that's first, and how the pandemic will actually develop in autumn. But what we observe is that capacity is still there on the airliner side. at least from the perspective of the size of the fleet. Maybe not so much from the seat capacity, but from the size of the fleet, which is more important for our operations. So until the capacity is still there, waiting to be used, I'm very optimistic that the traffic will recover in FAB CE area in 2023 already, or maybe at the latest 2024.
Okay, thank you, Matej.
From the number of movements point.
Okay, Alex, will we have to cope with a traffic level as in 2019 or even more or less, and if when?
Well, that's pretty difficult, I have to say, to predict, because number one, there's always the danger of external shocks. There could be another wave, there could be another crisis of, who knows, and that will obviously influence the timeline. But we have to be aware that this industry is undergoing very deep structural changes at the moment. It is very difficult to predict what the results of these structural changes will be. The growth that we observed until 2019 was fueled by two things from my perspective. One is the importance of aviation for globalized economy. Now that's going to be reduced for several reasons now, because business travel will be reduced through digitization over teams and stuff like that, but also because the global economic activity may be reduced further to the COVID crisis. And the second driver of demand growth prior COVID was a price-induced demand by the low-cost carriers. Now, this is also going to be, to some extent, in danger because of the whole environmental discussion and the desire to reduce flying to not the minimum, but sort of the optimum, avoiding price-induced flying that wouldn't happen if it weren't for this 10 euro ticket prices. So there are structural changes undergoing in this industry, which seem to be lowering the demand or have a lowering impact on the demand. And so it's very difficult. I don't think it's going to be, we will see 2019 traffic levels anytime soon, perhaps with the exception of some peaks here and there, but not overall until at least 2024.
Always so difficult to predict the future. Thank you very much to our experts, Matej Eljon from FAB CE Aviation Services Limited, Alexander Hanslik from Austro Control, and Jozsef Bakos from HungaroControl. In this InterFAB context, this experts talk hosted by FAB CE this time. And maybe Alex already mentioned the topic for the next InterFAB expert talk, expert discussion, when you said structural changes in aviation and ANSPs are facing. So I'm sure we will not run out of issues, not run out of discussions in this very interesting industry. Thank you very much to all of those who joined us and for all of those who sent us their questions. This discussion has also been recorded, so we will be happy if it will be viewed on the InterFAB website or from the InterFAB website later on then and on the YouTube channel. Thank you very much for participating. We hope we could deliver an interesting discussion and an interesting expert talk. Yes, and we hope to see you very soon, hopefully in person, in any context. All the best from Vienna. Have a nice day and see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.